Ribeiro-Addy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Anyone who's looked at the autumn statement for what it is will understand that poverty will increase as a direct result of it. The decision to increase benefits by 10.1% next year doesn't match the level of inflation, which is 11.1% in the most recent monthly data. Millions of the poorest in our country will still face a fall in spending power as inflation soars. It follows years of cuts to the real value of benefits that affect the lives of 9 million households, and particularly for some of those on the opposite benches and some of those in the press who like to demonise those on benefits, 7 million of those households include someone who's actually in work. Yet this situation is even worse than the headline inflation data suggests. The Office for National Statistics estimates that consumer price inflation is actually higher for lower income groups, 11.9% for those in the second income decile, and a truly shocking 12.5% for those in the very lowest income decile. So as a result of these decisions on benefits, the very poorest will get even poorer. This is a similar picture with regard to the minimum wage, which the benches opposite continue to falsely claim is the national living wage. This was not, as the Chancellor claimed, a generous offer. A rise of 9.7% is also below inflation and way below the inflation rate for the poorest. The Real Living Wage Foundation says that a living wage worthy of the name would be £10.90 across the country, and in London it would need to be £11.95 per hour to take into account the higher costs of living in the capital. So the announcement in the autumn statement is actually a real terms cut that leaves the lowest paid workers worse off and leaves them still struggling for a wage they can actually afford to live on. Now, much of that excess, not all of it, is related to the cost of housing, either in terms of rents or in mortgage costs, and we all know very well the damage this government has already caused in relation to mortgage costs. And we have yet to hear an apology from the front benches opposite for their actions in this debacle, which is their responsibility and theirs alone. The government seems to treat constituents like mine in Streatham as if they were all junior investment bankers or recently hired city lawyers who are making their first steps on the housing ladder that leads to a lovely townhouse worth millions somewhere in central London. But they're not. They are young people living together in cramped accommodation because they can't afford to pay rents, or families who have just seen their mortgage interest payments shoot up because of the actions of this government. Or they're simply forced to live at home, unable to pay for a place of their own. In fact, this government's whole propaganda campaign on levelling up never included the poorest in London. How can there be levelling up when the poorest are made even poorer by this statement? Or if the cost of living is being made unbearable by the direct actions of this government? But we shouldn't be surprised about this, Con, because we know what the Prime Minister really thinks about the reality of levelling up. He was caught on camera boasting that he had redirected funding from deprived urban areas to well-to-do areas. Yeah. Most notably, the statement didn't once mention the disastrous impact of Brexit. Now, the SNP spokesperson earlier, who's no longer in his place, oh, you're on your place, sorry, says that no one wanted to talk about Brexit. But I want to tell the honourable member that I do want to talk about Brexit, because I remain proud of my decision to vote against the implementation agreement, not a deal, because unlike was said repeatedly in this House, there was no deal put before us in December 2020. We, the representatives of the people in this country, were not given a say on the details of the deal, and we were given no meaningful vote on it. Instead, we were presented with a shoddy implementation agreement at the 11th hour and strong-armed into being for or against again and threatened with crashing out of the EU without a deal. And what do we have to show for it? Spiralling inflation, travel chaos, labour shortages, crops rotting in the fields, a significant reduction to British exports, a loss of work and opportunities due to visa restrictions, food prices hiked up in our supermarkets, and the sharpest fall in living standards on record. And that isn't even all of it. Whether or not people voted to leave or to remain, like most of the people did in my constituency, nobody voted for this. And we can't hide any longer behind the economic effect of the pandemic when other G7 countries have all bounced back and we're the only one with a smaller economy and set to have the lowest growth in the G20 bar Russia. Yet the Chancellor was arrogant enough to come to the House and pretend as if Brexit had nothing to do with the situation that we find ourselves in. If the people of this country are the most important thing in this country, then there's no patriotism and there's certainly no freedom in supporting the inept economic policies that this government has inflicted on all of us. Brexit has been a complete and utter disaster, and if this government does not address this, there will be a reckoning. And in the meantime, the average person in this country is left to pay the price. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. She's given a very passionate defence of why she believes Brexit to be a disaster. I obviously think differently. If Labour in government, would she be giving the same speech to her front bench?
I believe the honourable member doesn't know me very well. I would be giving exactly the same speech. Now I could say, well, I could say much more, Madam Deputy Speaker, about just how much the reinforcement of the entrenched discrimination that this government has carried out and this statement exacerbates. But in conclusion, the vulnerable have not been protected by this government, and this statement has made them even worse off. Thank you.